Welcome to Speak Up, the television arm of Freemasonry in New Zealand. I am Barry Rushton, your host, and we have a great show for you this evening. I can tell you there is something wonderful happening in a small town in northern France that my first guest, Mark Hall, and others are responsible for. This is fabulous for all New Zealanders. Following Mark, my next guest is a young chef called Craig Parry. I can't wait to put the spotlight on what really goes on backstage in the kitchens of the restaurants. And closing out the show is our regular contributor, Graham Houston, with another great story on a Freemason who has made history here in New Zealand and around the world. Mark Hall, welcome. Great to have you on the show tonight.
Good to be here, Barry.
Now, I know that you are a trustee on the New Zealand War Memorial Lerkenwah Trust, right?
That's correct.
What a great thing that is. Tell us more about that.
The trust was established to remember and commemorate and tell the stories and educate young New Zealanders about their forebears during the First World War. It will also be used to tell the story of the New Zealanders involved in the Second World War.
Now listen, before we talk about this Lerkenwah, which is the town, I'd like just to set the scene. Imagine it's Anzac morning, but you're actually over at Gallipoli at the dawn service. I mean, can everybody sort of feel that? I mean, I've never been, but I have been to the Auckland one a number of times, and I've been to Warkworth, I've been to Birkenhead, my little town. It's a tremendous feeling, isn't it? Why do we feel that feeling?
Well, I think it's a way of remembering or commemorating those who have gone before us and made great sacrifice. It's a feeling of fellowship, I guess, and even for the midday services or the 11 o'clock services, the increasing number of people who attend, the school children, young people who attend, and increasing numbers, I think it's something to do with our nationhood and our feeling as a nation.
Absolutely, and that feeling, or the amount of people who now respect and worship the Anzac service for what it is and what it does, is increasing all the time, isn't it?
It has over the last 2 decades, probably.
And
it has
the number
increased.
of people who take a pilgrimage to, or lucky enough to take a pilgrimage, they don't have to actually go on Anzac morning to feel that. They can go at any time and still feel that respect, can't they?
They do. Friends have been to Gallipoli, for instance, not on Anzac Day, and there is that feeling there. But if you go to Europe, as we're going to talk about shortly, over 100,000 New Zealanders went to northern France in 2016 to visit the various sites.
That's incredible.
So that's an incredible number.
And that's a great lead into this little town in the north part of France, right on the Belgian border, called Lerkenwah.
It is.
Tell us the story behind this. It's fascinating.
Well, the New Zealand division was leading the Third Army, chasing the Germans out of France, essentially. And this was in the dying days of the First World War. Not that they knew it then, of course. The town of Lerkenwah was in the advance of the New Zealand division, and the 3rd Rifle Brigade was directed that they would take the town, liberate it. It was heavily defended by the Germans. The population was still in the town, although we subsequently found that they were hiding in the cellars, because it's a very old town, very old.
It was a walled city, right?
It's a walled city, a Vauban walled city, one of many that are in France. The New Zealand division did not want to destroy the town, obviously, and so the artillery was directed that they wouldn't shell the town, but they did shell the ramparts, and the engineers provided a smoke screen to prevent the Germans seeing the advance. Ladders were acquired, and one of the great stories is Lieutenant Averill led a team up scaling the walls. That provided the first entry into the town. They fought their way through, captured all the Germans in the town, who eventually surrendered, liberated the population, none of whom were harmed or killed.
Not one civilian was lost, which is terrific, because they knew the civilians were in the town at the time as well.
They did. Unfortunately, 135 New Zealand soldiers were killed including 4 Freemasons.
4 Freemasons indeed. There were 500 who stayed behind and about 2,000 or 3,000 German troops. And so, and the scaling of the wall and getting in, what a wonderful, wonderful. And this is why, isn't it, that the French people in this town have such a great respect and such a great reverence for New Zealand people and the history, because they saved the town, liberated the people, and that's why yourself, along with others, are trying or endeavouring to make this memorial there, right? Tell us more about the memorial and what's actually happening.
The memorial is within the walls of the town. In fact, it's the former mayor's residence from the 19th century. That site was identified, and with the help of the French government and the local municipality, we have acquired that property at a heavily discounted rate. They've been very generous to us.
It's a wonderful property, isn't it? It's over quite a large area, one of the largest areas left, single area in that town.
Exactly. It's a 1 hectare site. It was used up until recently as a police station, the gendarmerie. And attached to that, within the grounds, are former residences, which we intend to use as accommodation, and that will help in part with the cash flow and support the museum. So the idea being it will eventually be cash neutral.
If people go on to Google and actually Google a little town, they'll realise it is a tiny little town. There's no Ridges, or there's no sort of Sheratons there, you know. No. And so consequently there are a number of New Zealanders already who visit this site because of its significance, correct?
They do. The town in 1918 had a population of 3,000. Today it's 5,000. So it really hasn't grown that much. And it does have a significant visitor population. The unfortunate thing with Le Quesnoy, though, is there's nothing there apart from the town to attract people. It has no other tourist attractions. And why we want to establish the museum there is give Kiwis and the French and the Brits a reason to visit that town and see and to hear about the New Zealand exploits in World War I.
Mark, the gratitude of the people, obviously at the time for being liberated, was there, but was immense. But that has continued on to this day, isn't it? What are the town folks have been doing to reflect that connection they still have with New Zealand? In
the town itself, if you visit there, amongst the other names are Rue Helen Clark, Place to All Blacks, Place Waikato, the Liberation Road, which was the axis of advance for the New Zealand division, then comes into what's called Rue Nouvelle-Zélande. So the New Zealand connection
is everywhere.
Is everywhere.
So the Freemasons now are right behind this, and the reason they are behind it is why? It's because it represents.
Well, it represents the ethos of what Freemasonry is all about. Yeah. Caring for your fellow man. Significant numbers of Freemasons, over 2,000 or 2,400 or so, joined up in the First War. Quite a number of those were killed. Yeah. As I said, at the capture of Le Quesnoy.
So now I know that there's sort of like a budget they're all after, right? I know it's going to be set out over a number of years to actually get the certain parts, the phases done, but really it's going to take about $15 million in theory or thereabouts, correct?
Yes, we have a budget, a plan that, apart from the acquisition of the site, which has already been done, that over the 5 years we will establish the site as a true memorial and museum to New Zealand's involvement in World War I and World War II.
Fantastic. Talking about Freemasonry, now I know you've been a Freemason now for coming up 28
years.
28 years, right? Before that you served with the New Zealand Police, correct?
I did.
Tell us how you got into Freemasonry and what keeps you satisfied still becoming a member.
Well, it was a colleague who interested me in Freemasonry, and I joined up. That was in 1992. I must say, initially my interest, after a while my interest waned, and when I rejoined or re-enthused myself, the reason is, I think for most of us, it's all about the fellowship. It's the camaraderie, it's with like-minded people, with a purpose. That's why my particular lodge, the Lodge of the Liberal Arts, that's my thing. I enjoy that environment.
You know, it's funny you should say that, because just coming up shortly is a new movie by Peter Jackson called Lest We Forget. And he talks about the camaraderie in the army. We think back on how terrible it must have been in the mud and the guns and shooting. Of course it was. But a lot of people, the returned servicemen, say that often it was the best part of their life because of everybody had a single purpose, a single intent, had a single goal, and they were mates and they were there, you know. And Freemasonry does have a bit of that.
Exactly, yes. In those days, as now, in combat, you have to rely on your fellow soldiers for your very survival. And that carries on in peacetime.
You know, if people watching would actually like to donate to this cause, and it is a great cause, I mean, I can't wait for it to actually be totally in fruition, they'd go to the website, which is nzwmm.org.nz. That's right. So that's nzwmm.org.nz, and there are a couple of videos on there that you can actually see the town, you can see the building, you can see the intent. It's really, really terrific.
It is.
Thank you for having. It's been great having you. Much success with this. I know it's going to happen, and I hope the Freemasons will support it right throughout the country.
I'm sure they will.
Thank you. My second guest this evening is Chef Craigan Perry. Craigan, it is nice to see you. That's an interesting name, my friend, Craigan.
It is strange, yes.
Well, it is. You
all the way from Scotland. Yeah.
Oh, Scotland.
Yeah.
And the Perry spelled a bit different too, right?
It is a bit different with an IE instead of the Y, as per usual.
Young guys, they trip us old blokes up all the time. Mate, I'm glad you're here. I've always wanted to ask questions of chefs. You know, there's something you want to do. But before I do that, tell us a little bit about why you love being a chef. Tell me how it started, the passion behind it. You obviously went to culinary school, I guess that's what you'd call it?
I did, yes. So I went to culinary school, actually when I was still working in IT as my previous role, and I decided to change my career completely. So I went to culinary school for about an 8-month course. It was very short.
Yep.
And then got a job straight away, and have been at the same place since for now. And I love it. I love it every day.
So culinary schools, you turn up and there's your main chef there, or do you have a number of chefs come in and tell you stuff?
Yeah, so
how does that work?
For us, we had one chef,
yep.
And he was a really, really good chef. He used to have a really good restaurant on Ponsonby Road a while ago. And then he would give a little demonstration up on a stage, essentially, and then we would go in and then cook the same thing that he's shown us how to do. With him obviously coming around and helping us and guiding us in the right way.
Right. How many potential chefs were in your class?
I think we had about 15. It was quite a small class, but yeah,
Okay.
about 15.
And I know at that time you probably think, hey, we'll always be mates and so on like that. Do you know if any of them or all of them are still being chefs, or have some dropped out? Have they? Because that always happens.
I know one definitely is still a chef.
One?
Yeah, he works in the same company that I work at.
Okay, yeah.
And that's about it that I know. There was a few older ladies who kind of did it, I think, more as a extra learning with a bit of time. Yeah.
You see, again, I'm sure it's like lots of things in life. You've got to have a passion if you like it, right? Tell me why you decided to actually get into food. I
guess I've always really been into food. I've always been a big foodie. And when I wasn't a chef, I would cook a lot at home and do kind of interesting things, and was really into watching Chef's Table and things like that on Netflix, and the really interesting chef documentaries. And I guess I decided that I need to change my career, I need to change what I'm doing. That was my first kind of choice. I guess in the back of my head, I actually always wanted to be a Freemason. I'm not a Freemason, a chef. I did always want to be a Freemason too, but I always wanted to be a chef, but I kind of had that thought that a chef is not really, you don't go and study, and it's not like you go to uni for it and that sort of thing, and it's kind of seen as not, like you kind of, I don't know, that you're not really using your full potential. So you
just learn on the job, you just get into it, right?
Exactly, yeah, and it's an experience, and it's a practice thing, and it all takes time, but it's.
So I now know that you're in one of the busiest restaurants here in Auckland. I know that's true. And so obviously it's a stressful time. And we've seen the television shows where knives get thrown and pots get banged and plates get dropped and everything. Yeah. So you're in a stressful, at times, environment, right? But so how do you retain the passion? Is it just because you love it?
I just love it. I love what I do, and I actually I thrive off that kind of that buzz of that real pressure to deliver. So that's something that I enjoyed and I have enjoyed for a long time. So I enjoy it, and I guess that's the main thing, really.
You see, it's like I play a little bit of golf, and everybody, tends, gee, I wish I was like Tiger Woods, I mean. But you've got to have the ability, but there's more than just the ability. You've got to have an attitude, right? I mean, for anything in life. So consequently, do you have sort of desires? Do you lie in bed thinking, gee, I'm going to get my own restaurant. I'm going to get my own 12 restaurants. I'm going to have my own television show. Do you see stuff like that in the back of your mind?
Yeah, I have a long-term goal to have my own place eventually. Yeah, definitely. And I've worked it out all to the name and the layout and what I'd love it to be, ideally, and that's where I'm working towards. That's where I'm trying to get to. So,
mate, I've got some questions I've always wanted to ask chefs, and so I want you quick fire stuff, quick fire stuff. How do you cook the best steak?
It depends on what kind of beef, really, but what you really want is that brown, beautiful caramelization on the surface of the steak. That's what gives all the flavour, and that's what you want. Something.
No, I'm going to add to that. So do you get it brown first and flip it over and get it brown and then turn it down?
Yeah, once again, really depends on the steak. But a hot pan, really hot pan, get it in there, sear it either side. You can if it's a big steak, you can finish it in the oven. That always works really well. Yeah, and then always a bit of butter does the world wonders.
Now, you probably haven't had a great experience in this because you've only been in this one restaurant since you're out of school. But restaurant critics, I mean, some of like the owner of the restaurant, does he hate restaurant critics?
No, I think restaurant critics are crucial to what we do, obviously, because without them, no one really hears about us and what you're doing. And obviously, you want to make sure that what they're hearing is good. So that's what you're working towards, but you can't hate them. And nowadays, everyone's a critic with Instagram and everything like that. So everyone is a critic.
What's the one ingredient you can't do without?
Salt.
Yeah, I think that's what my wife said too. That'll be the one for sure. Now I know this will never happen to you, but if you were on death row, what would be your last meal request?
That is a really tricky one. I always struggle to answer that question. Probably at the moment. Maybe it's because of what I'm feeling like right now. I'd eat steak frites, steak with chips and a nice butter sauce. That's herb butter sauce. That's all I could.
Probably a nice bulky Pinot Noir or
something good.
Now, last question. Tell me, have you seen in the time you've been there, been a couple of years now, have you seen, what's the new food trend happening right now in restaurants?
I guess with places popping up now, you're seeing a lot of sort of Asian fusion, Southeast Asian fusion, and people trying to combine different flavours from different places into making kind of a new cuisine is what's kind of happening a lot around, out and about.
Right. Now, I know that you're a young Freemason, right? You've just joined. Obviously, I guess you're probably trying to hide the fact that you're a chef because I know they want you to sort of prepare their refectory meals, But tell me, why did you trip into Freemasonry? Why do you like it so much? I know that you're enthusiastic about it, maybe because you're just, young, but tell us what you love about this whole thing.
What I love about it, I guess it's quite a hard question to answer. There's so many aspects of it that I love, but I love the fact that I have all my brothers in the lodge and we all get along really well, and I just enjoy being around them. And then it's the other side of it, the ritual side, and getting that right. I enjoy the memorizing the lines and then delivering it. And
the theatre.
Just the theatre and giving some passion to it and really instilling in that candidate that this is their one and only time and you really want to make it a special one. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
So you can see yourself sort of moving through the different jobs. That's what they are through Freemasons Lodge. You finally get to be the worshipful master, and you finally sort of can say, well, this is how we're going to run the meetings. This is how we're going to. I can see it in you that you're actually going to do that. There's another thing that I know that you are quite passionate about too, is the benevolent side of things. I know you think about that quite a lot. What can we do in the community to make things even better? Yeah,
definitely. I'm thinking about that a lot, especially lately, and. I have many ideas, but I want Freemasons to get the name out there, so people know who we are and what we're doing.
You mean speaking up?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what we need to do. Yeah, people need to know about us so that they can actually call on us for help. If they don't know that we're there, how will they know that maybe we have a charitable cause we need some help funding or people, some manpower, if they don't know that we're there and willing to help, they'll never ask us. So,
Mate, if I call your restaurant up, will you get me a window seat if I drop names or
most
something like that?
certainly, yeah, of course.
Thanks for being such a great guest, mate. Looking
Thank you.
forward to it, and I'll see you at the restaurant very soon.
Sure.
Thank you, mate. And closing out the show tonight, of course, is our regular contributor, Graham Houston. Graham, I know you've got someone special again tonight.
Thanks, Barry.
Tell us who you've got.
Sir Joseph Banks.
Oh, well known.
Well known, Sir Joseph Banks, an eminent British botanist, explorer and naturalist. Noted for his prominent promotion of the natural sciences.
Yeah.
He was born in 1743 in Westminster in England, so it's a long time ago.
Long
time ago. He was the only son, and he didn't follow the course of the family employment. His great-grandfather and his grandfather and his father had all been in the British Parliament, but he didn't. He was educated at home, then on to Harrow, then on to Eton, then on to Cambridge, and finally at Oxford.
Far too clever.
Sounds like it, but I don't think he was that academic. He was more of the practical than the academic. So much so that when his father did die and he was able to settle on his inheritance, it made him a wealthy guy. He left Oxford and then set about following his passion, which was the practical side of naturalists and botanists, botany, and he wanted to study plants and find plants. He gained prominence and probably fame when he joined a voyage on the HMS Niger that went to Newfoundland and Labrador, and he was responsible for thousands of plants coming back to England, many never seen before in England, so that England became the largest repository of exotic plants of any country in the world, largely through Joseph Banks.
Kew Garden, isn't it?
Well, yes, and we'll come to the Kew Gardens part there. He was elected to the Royal Society, and when the Royal Society persuaded the Admiralty to let James Cook with the Endeavour come down to the South Pacific to observe the transit of Venus, they wanted Banks on that boat too.
You know, if it had been in America, they wouldn't have called it the Endeavour. They would have called it the Enterprise, right?
Probably was. That gives a modern slant on today.
That's exactly what it was like, right?
Yeah,
You're out in the wilderness of the universe, right? Boom.
But this is still the Endeavour. He came down to observe, and he and 8 other people of his staff came down on the boat. Now, the observation of the transit of Venus wasn't as successful as what they had hoped for, but the botanical part was a big success. He had a great affection for Australia, particularly New South Wales. And at one stage, at an inquiry back in the UK, it said, uncharacteristically for him, that he thought Botany Bay would make a fine penal settlement. Of course, that's what it became. Many places are named after Joseph Banks. Many plants are named after Joseph Banks. And in particular, if you look at the genus of the plant, rather than the plant themselves. So if you take the Banksia plant, the genus, there are a lot of plants within that genus, and the Grevillea is a common one out here. They also had his image on the $5 note for years.
That's right.
And it stayed there until Australia changed the type of note and brought in the polymer note, and the image changed then. In 1996, the Australian Post honoured Joseph Banks, even as late as that, with a postage stamp with Joseph Banks on there as well.
Incredibly famous, wasn't he?
He became known as sort of the father of Australia. He was a specialist in everything. It didn't matter if it was plants, it could be animals, it could be colonisation. He was regarded as the specialist. But he came to New Zealand in 1769, about October 1769. And we know the story about young Nick sighting land first off what's now young Nick's Head. And he came and so Banks, together with Daniel Solander, I think it was part of the original landing party with Cook in Tarangai, now the port of Gisborne. And they landed there. And incidentally, as far as I can tell, that was the first recorded landing of a Freemason in New Zealand was Joseph Banks when he set foot, 1769. And in fact, we're coming up to the 250th year since the first Freemasons set foot in New Zealand.
Well, we've got Banks Peninsula down here.
Got a lot of names down there too.
Wow.
Well, his time in New Zealand, and particularly that in and around the Poverty Bay, wasn't great. There were a lot of, there were lives lost in their interaction with Maoris, but that's another story, is the history of New Zealand. I guess one of the enduring features of Banks' time in New Zealand was the number of plants that he identified and collected. Now, there were over 400 that they took back to England, and many of those had never been seen before. They were quite unique. And it wasn't until he landed a little bit further around in New Zealand that he suddenly saw the majestic landscape and the beauty of the landscape that really intrigued him about New Zealand. And he was particularly taken with the kahikatea tree and saying, boy, they were so good and the Navy should be down here to get those. He saw the Hauraki Plains as being able to be drained, which as they are today, but he also saw similarities between the fens back in his home area, which was drained. He was part of the progressive thought of the Enlightenment of Progress, which was, could be summarised as saying, the ability to manipulate the world through technology was of benefit to everyone. But even he started to doubt that a little bit when he saw what was happening to the fens, wetlands back in his home area, when the bird life, the fish life and insect life started to disappear. And now that they're re-establishing that, that's all coming back. So he lost a little bit of faith in that towards the end too.
What an incredible ability to actually take plant life from here, stick it on a ship and sail, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks back to England through different climates and have them survive. It's incredible.
And not only that, because of the type of ship that they were in at that stage, many of those plants had to endure very rough seas and very rough old boats. And so there was no stabilising influence there. And as you say, some of those ships could be quite... And he lost a lot through there. Now, of the plants, the 3,000 different unique plants that they were recording back in England, over 400 of them came from out of here.
Wow.
And so that it was quite... New Zealand plant life was quite unique in terms of what he expected to find after going throughout the rest of the world. Now, he became a Freemason, and it's hard to tell exactly when he became a Freemason because either the records were lost or they weren't kept. But it seems that he was a Freemason prior to 1768 because the Somerset House Lodge, I think it was number 2, had him on record as being a member prior to 1768. And it had him on their register after 1768 as being a member of that. And I think that Somerset House Lodge was originally the old Horn Lodge, number 4, and has subsequently turned into Somerset House Inverness Lodge, number 4. Sometimes some of this information is a little bit hard to gather, but I'd like to say thank you to Wayne Marriott in Bay of Plenty, a Mason in Bay of Plenty, for his help in putting some of that information together. But Joseph Banks was such an interesting character. He was involved in so many facets of life. It seemed that whatever he touched, he was very successful at.
He married but never had any children. Correct?
Never had any children.
That's right. So
and so the baronet title died when he died as well.
What a great choice, mate. Good on you. Terrific, Graham.
Thank you, Barry.
Excellent, mate. Another great Freemason. There's a lot of them out there.
A lot of them out there and
Thanks
changing
again.
the world.
Good on you, mate. Thank you. So that's our show for this evening. Thank you for joining us. Remember, if you would like to know anything about Freemasonry, simply go to the website, which is freemasonsnz.org, or call the telephone number on the screen below. I look forward to seeing you next week.